She was this gun-toting, whiskey-drinking broad.
The super epic fucking broad.
She was a pioneer in the industry.
She's also so famous and so controversial.
So controversial.
So she's kind of a big fucking deal.
Her story is so incredible. She belongs on this podcast because she's a broad you should know. Hello and welcome to Broads You Should Know, the podcast about amazing and noteworthy women from history. I am your host, Sara Gorski, and today I am wearing another one of my new favorite shirts, my feminist dragon shirt. If you're on YouTube, I'm showing it off right now. Subscribe on YouTube if you aren't already at Broads You Should Know. And I love my feminist dragon. I'm wearing it all the time now. fancytee.com. That's where I'm getting my fun feminist shirts. But anyway, today, instead of doing a broad for you, I am going to do something a little bit different. I acknowledged in an episode a couple weeks ago that when my work and travel schedules are all very overwhelming, it's sometimes really hard for me to finish all of the broads research and get everything recorded in time for the Wednesday new episode deadline. And on those days that I can't finish my research on time, I sometimes replay previous broads episodes that we've done, older episodes. So then newer listeners can at least hear something new, or older listeners maybe can hear something that they missed or something. But I always feel super lame when I do that. It feels a little bit like cheating. And I was recently reminded by my friend Will McFadden, who, by the way, is literally the funniest man in Los Angeles. Everybody should hire him. Will and I were talking, and he reminded me, hey, you know, it's your podcast. You can do whatever you want. And that also sometimes when you change up the pattern and the rhythm a little bit, it's even good for the success of the podcast. So I am taking Will's advice, and I'm going to change it up a little bit. And instead of re-airing old episodes, I'm actually going to just instead do more kind of unscripted chats with you. And I'm going to call these chats, because I like to name everything on this podcast, I'm going to call them Broad Opinions, because I'm going to be chatting about issues related to broads today, right now. Primarily in the United States, since that's where I live, but hopefully not exclusively United States, because we all know that just because a broad lives in another country doesn't mean that the issues that she's facing don't affect broads literally everywhere, all over the world. Oftentimes, all of the issues we're facing are all connected to each other and part of the same shifting tides, right? And of course, these chats, my broad opinions with you, are going to be primarily based on my own research and understanding of the world. They're going to be my own opinions. I will always try to give you some context for why I have that opinion, but I'm not going to list out friggin' bibliographies for you at the end of every episode. So if you want to learn more, you're going to have to use your Google skills and find the data and trust that I read it and that I at least assessed the source as something valid, right? So I've already talked way too much explaining the concept, so I just want to get to it today. Today's broad opinion is brought to you by the incessant ridiculousness of the Democratic centrists and their news media. That's right. I want to talk with you about the state of the Democratic ticket this election. If you're not a Democrat, maybe this isn't the episode for you. If you are a Democrat, I think you should listen. First of all, I just want to qualify myself just for a second here, because I know that you might be thinking, hey, Sara, just because you watch a bunch of The West Wing doesn't mean you know shit about politics. And you would be correct that I do not have a career or a degree in politics or the government, and that I do watch The West Wing a lot. That's a fact, but it's Martin Sheen and Allison Janney, and Aaron Sorkin's writing's really good. And if you don't watch it already, it's your loss, really. However, I'm here to tell you that I did actually volunteer for the Elizabeth Warren campaign in the 2020 election. And for the better part of like 9 months, I was a part of a really awesome grassroots campaign for president. You may or may not know, Warren did not take any money from super PACs. So her campaign was grassroots through and through, scrappy, and it was fierce. And all of us that were volunteering for her, especially kind of the core group, we really just believed in her and all that she could do to make this country a better place. And so we donated our time and our energy to try to help make that happen. And as the election got closer and closer, I found myself volunteering to run the GOTV Center in CD30 in Burbank. GOTV is Get Out the Vote. And before election time, there's always a Get Out the Vote campaign to try to get people to the polls or filling out their vote by mail forms. And CD13 is the Congressional District 30. So, and that is in Burbank, Adam Schiff's district. I have lots of problems with Schiff. We'll talk about that in another episode. But that was the area that I was focused for this Get Out the Vote campaign. And it was a ride. It was super challenging and it was really exhausting work. And you might be like shrugging your shoulders, being like, whatever, Warren didn't get enough votes to stay in after Super Tuesday. But you know what? She did get enough votes to pass that like 15% threshold to be viable in my district, in CD30. And that is a direct result of all of our efforts on the ground in that grassroots campaign. All of the volunteers that signed up for shifts and went door to door talking about Warren's policies and making calls at the phone banks, all of the friends that I like nudged and harassed to come and help me, we did that. So, by the way, if you ever tell me I can't make a difference in any of these things, just know that's just not true. Your effort, no matter how small, no matter how little time or money, I hate to say it because I'm not fundraising right now, but like no matter what you do, does make a difference and has ripple effects and the power combined to do more. So, you know, you think about like, oh, CD30, we made her viable in that district. What if we had, 100 more me's and 1,000 more volunteers like the people we had at CD30 in the other districts as well, and she would have been viable everywhere and she would have stayed in the race, and how that might look different now, right? Like that is grassroots. That's kind of this kind of core concept of grassroots and the power of grassroots. But also, I want to say, on this topic, I know I'm like on a side quest here with you, but I remember during the election and like the week or two after, we watched all those returns come in because vote by mail is in California, and so it's a week or two until the numbers are final as all of the ballots are coming in from the mail. And I watched on election night, and Warren's percentage was like hovering at like 11 or 12%. I can't remember exactly. And throughout the week, as the mail-in votes came in, it kept getting higher and higher and higher, and it finally crossed that 15% threshold. So never again will I accept somebody telling me that, quote, my vote doesn't matter. It does matter, because at the very end of the Warren in CD30 story, it was a very small number of votes that put her over that edge. And if that happened in every district, the very small number of votes. So every single one of us in the US and across the whole friggin' world should cast a vote in every single election while we are still able to have democratic elections. And spoiler alert, that is not a given for the future. Your votes now, this election right now, are going to help determine whether or not we continue to have free and fair elections in the future. That is literally at stake on this ballot. So that was a little bit of a side note, a little backstory. Back to the topic at hand. The Democratic centrists and their news media. So I primarily listen to NPR in the car. I love NPR. I've loved NPR forever. I used to donate and then I had to pause when I got too broke, but then I'm going to bring it back when I'm not too broke, etc. NPR is one of my primary sources. And I get in the car to drive to the grocery store, the gym, wherever. And every single time I turn on the radio this week, every single time, I hear the phrase, quote, Biden's disastrous debate performance. And the New York Times, for some reason, thinks there's some kind of authority on whether or not Biden should run. So they've been posting a bunch of articles, sometimes like 2 or 3 a day, about the latest developments on this front, calling for him to step down, et cetera, et cetera. This is the New York Times doing this. And apparently also the DNC and prominent centrist Dems are now also having meetings about it, some behind closed doors, some not, but they're all questioning Biden's age. And anecdotally, I have heard a dozen people or more tell me that their parents aren't confident about Biden anymore, and they aren't either, they haven't been, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera. All over the Democratic-leaning news and the lips of Democratic voters, I'm hearing this everywhere, and I am here to say to all of you, it's too fucking late, y'all. It's too late. In 2020, the progressives, myself included, really tried to bring in a different nominee. And we knew Biden was pretty old then, and he would only be getting older. But the centrists freaking loved him so much that they overlooked those concerns and they voted him in anyway. And over the last 9-ish months, as y'all and myself chuckled and cringed at all the shenanigans of all the Trump candidates who thought they could challenge Trump, at the same time that was happening, we were laughing. Y'all were holding up Biden as the Democratic candidate. He's been the candidate. He is the candidate. He will be the candidate for this election cycle. And of course, it makes sense, right? He's the incumbent. He is president now, so he is the incumbent. And for those of you who don't know that, the incumbent candidate always has massive advantages over their challengers, both inside and outside their own party. And this is a historical fact. There's data about it. You can look it up if you want to. The incumbent always has a huge advantage, not a little advantage, a huge advantage. So it makes sense that Biden was going to be this candidate. But there was a window. There was this window of time right before the nominees were kind of locked in, and they aren't officially locked in. That's about to happen. But they have been now the nominees. The other challengers have dropped out of all of the races. And there was a time there before that happened that maybe the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and the centrists could have lifted up another candidate. And they could have done a killer marketing campaign to make America fall in love with them and have Biden endorse them, et cetera, et cetera. But no, that's not what people did. Biden was the guy. He was the blessed nominee of the Democratic Party and the DNC. But now, after this dumbass debate, now you're wondering if he's too old. And it is too fucking late. We have T-minus 4 months. 4 months until the election, and that is not enough time to pull a switcheroo. This is also my opinion as a marketing professional, what it takes to sell that message. Any switcheroo that you pull, no matter how much I personally love the candidate and rally behind them, no matter what, 4 months is not enough time to roll out a campaign large enough to win over the extremely large swath of apathetic non-voters who are either disillusioned or angry with the fucked up system that keeps, amongst other things, sending money and weapons to Israel, right? People are mad at the Democrats. They're mad at Biden. They might not even vote. They've already been talking about that before this friggin' debate. There's a large group of people in this category. And there's not enough time. There's not enough time. 4 months is not enough time to win that group over. So I'm telling you, what we have to do right now is shut the fuck up. about this debate performance, about whether or not Biden is too old. We need to decide now whether or not we're going to stick with Kamala as VP, which if you don't like Kamala, I actually request you to message, DM, comment, whatever, and tell me why. Because if you don't like Kamala, if you don't have a good reason, then I'm telling you it might actually be because you don't like women as much as you think you do. I'm going to challenge you. So we need to figure out, is it Kamala? Is it not? And then we need to sell hard how great the VP is, right? And also how much real progress has actually been achieved under Biden's administration, because the VP would still be Biden's administration no matter what happens to Biden. Student debt relief, that should be a huge cornerstone, for fuck's sake. How many people got their student loans forgiven or partially forgiven? How much that changed their lives? That needs to be the message. And then we have to fight for our lives in the Get Out the Vote campaigns, because it is going to be the hardest GOTV campaign that the country has ever seen. Ever. And I am going to be there. I'm going to be there on the front lines. I'm going to be there with you, dudes. And I feel like I hear this like little voice in the back being like, hey, what does this have to do with broads? You said you were going to talk about broads issues. So thank you to whoever that is who, needs to be the little voice. I am talking about this issue on Broads You Should Know because women's rights and the rights of all non-white, non-male identifying people are at stake in this election cycle. And that is not hyperbole. You told me it was hyperbole in 2016 when you didn't like Hillary. It wasn't hyperbole then, as you can see, and it's not hyperbole now. I'm not exaggerating. And for the sake of keeping this rant focused and not like 5 hours long, I'm going to focus on just like one broad related consequence of Trump's time in office. We've already seen the destruction of Roe versus Wade, which we know Roe versus Wade wasn't perfect, but it did protect women and women's health. And we have, since the fall of Roe v. Wade, we have watched conservative-led states demolish abortion rights and slaughter women's health care. And some states are like arresting women who get abortions, or threatening to arrest them at least. Doctors and hospitals are straight up refusing care because they're worried about any legal liabilities if the fetus dies. And even IVF treatments are now facing legal challenges. IVF treatments, the making of babies, is now facing challenges because of this massive thing that this stacked Supreme Court has done. And maybe that laundry list feels like anecdotal to you. Maybe it feels like some sort of story your aunt tells at Christmas when you were little or something. And if that's how you are right now and you're not quite as plugged in, I actually have some raw data for you. And this is also, I should say, this is a content warning for all y'all. For sexual assault and the R word. So if you cannot listen to that, understood, hit pause or fast forward, or you can just end the episode now, and I totally get it. Oh, the cat's here too. The cat wants to be a part of the podcast. This is Penelope. Hi. If you're on YouTube, you can see Penelope. She's upset about this too. So back in January, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a study that showed that in the 16 months after Texas outlawed almost all abortions, there were an estimated 26,313 rape-related pregnancies. Texas is also one of those states that does not make exceptions to the abortion ban for rape or incest. Only in the proven case of the mother's life being in danger, extreme danger, and even that is difficult to prove, right? That's why doctors are refusing care. So difficult to prove that in Texas, in the first 8 months of 2023, fewer than 10 abortions a month were performed in the entire state, with a grand total of 40 abortions in 8 months. 40 abortions in the state of Texas because women's lives were at stake. We can't pick entirely on Texas, of course. I hear you say that. And yes, let's acknowledge there were rapes other places and pregnancies other places. It turns out, quote, completed vaginal rapes were associated with nearly 65,000 pregnancies in the 14 states that implemented total abortion bans since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Researchers estimated about 59,000 of those pregnancies, or around 91%, occurred in states without abortion exceptions for rape. So it still makes Texas look pretty bad, because the Texas number, 26,313, is like 40% of the total. But we should also remember that Texas has by far a much larger population than all the other states combined. So we can't say the problem's only in Texas. It's everywhere. But Texas, alas, Texas, 26,313 rape-based pregnancies is fucking atrocious. And likely that number is even higher than that, since researchers all agree universally rapes are grossly underreported by victims. This we know. But that's the data we have. So we know that at least 26,313 women in Texas were sexually assaulted, resulting in pregnancy. And they are being forced to carry those pregnancies to term. So as you contemplate casting a third-party vote, or not voting at all, or questioning Biden's brainwaves and spreading further your perhaps well-intended but fucking malarkey, let's use his own word, it's malarkey, I want you to repeat that number, 26,313. And I want you to think hard about exactly what you're voting for this election. We are not voting for an 82-year-old with a speech impediment. He's always had a speech impediment, by the way. He always has. We're not voting for him. We're voting against a man and a party who would rather women die and decrease the surplus population than have any control over their family decisions, their careers, or their lives. So this election is 100% an issue for broads, and broads you should know. And I hope that you will vote accordingly. And I also hope that I will see you at the Get Out the Vote volunteer table. To learn more about Broads You Should Know, see, quotes from this episode, links to the articles, head on over to broadsyoushouldknow.com. While you're there, you can click on over to the About page and you can learn more about me. My photo, bio, links to my stuff is all right there. Are you following Broads You Should Know yet? We're on YouTube at Broads You Should Know, and of course Facebook and Instagram at Broads You Should Know, and Twitter at BYSK Podcast. Like, subscribe, comment, argue with me. Do you not like my opinion here? Do you disagree? I want to fucking hear about it. Let's have a discussion about it, because we have to figure this shit out. We have to get our house in line for November. To suggest a broad yourself, you can fill out the form on our website or email us at broadsyoushouldknow@gmail.com. I check those emails and I reply and I put your broad in my list of broads to cover in the future. Broads You Should Know is produced by me, Sara Gorski, and edited by me as well. Our music is by Darren Callahan, original music by Darren Callahan. And finally, if you really enjoyed this episode, or at least found it interesting, share it with your friends or family. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps new listeners to find us, and we need new listeners just like everybody else. All right, y'all. See you next week for another Broad You Should Know.